Thank you for joining me for an introduction to our VisKo technology, which uses the semantic web to support the answering of visualization queries. I am Nicholas Del Rio of the CyberShare Center here at the University of Texas at El Paso. For more information regarding VisKo, please visit trust.utep.edu/VisKo. I will begin by presenting a visualization and then describe the traditional approach for generating such a visualization by building pipeline applications from modules supported by visualization toolkits. I will then contrast the traditional approach with our proposed visualization queries, which provide a declarative alternative to writing procedural pipeline code. I will then discuss how a system can use the information provided in a visualization query to automatically synthesize visualization pipelines, provided ontological descriptions of the operators comprising a pipeline. I will then conclude by reiterating some important takeaway notions regarding VisKo. The presented rendering is a visualization of a seismic velocity model, covering a subterranean region in southern New Mexico. The rendering technique employed is isosurfaces, which highlights regions containing the same value. That is, every point along a slice or surface contains the same value. The surfaces are drawn at constant intervals, so this visualization is nice for identifying rapid changes in value, which are indicated by surfaces in close proximity. In this visualization, depth is depicted by the y-axis, and you can see how the velocity is increasing as a function of depth. The velocity model visualization was generated by a custom Java application that relied on the Visualization Toolkit, or VTK for short, for rendering. VTK is a visualization toolkit for rendering 3D visualizations and is supported by Sandia and Los Alamos National Labs, as well as the Army Research Lab. In general, visualization applications are usually built on these third-party rendering packages, such as VTK. Using these packages requires that developers corral their input datasets into a form that can be ingested by the third-party renderer, and so many visualization applications contain custom code that transforms input datasets into a form that complies with the rendering software. Here is a snippet of VTK Java code comprising our visualization application that generated the velocity model. I will describe the structure of this code in later slides. In order to write one of these visualization applications, users need to know how they want their data represented, as contour or raster maps or surfaces, perhaps. Users also need to know what properties a view should exhibit, for example, orientation, projection, color, and size. Regarding the datasets to be visualized, users need to know the format that the data is encoded in, such as NetCDF or Esri Grid. Additionally, they may need to know the type of the data they are working with, such as gravity or velocity data. Knowing what kind of data you are working with will help you set important parameters such as color mapping. Consider our velocity model visualization. We knew the dataset values ranged from 1 to 8 kilometers a second, and so our input color function is defined only on this interval. Regarding third-party rendering software, users need to know what views a software can generate. Many toolkits support either information or scientific visualization, and so users must be cognizant of this distinction. Additionally, users must know about the data format the toolkit ingests, as well as any performance claims. It may be the case that the toolkit cannot process very large datasets on the order of gigabytes or greater. In terms of development, users must know about the language that can be used to interface with the toolkit, such as Java, C++. VTK, for example, can be interfaced with Java, C++, TCL, and Python. Finally, users must understand the toolkit software dependencies. Many toolkits require that OpenGL or some other graphics library be installed prior to installing the toolkit itself. Once you understand your dataset and visualization toolkit capabilities, you can develop your visualization application. As described earlier, some portion of the application will focus on transforming input datasets into forms that can be rendered by the employed toolkit. The rest of the code will focus on gathering suitable arguments for the rendering, either from configuration files or user input, and invoking the renderer with the collected arguments. To summarize, the application that generated the velocity model visualization relies on VTK for rendering, renders the data as a set of isosurfaces, ingests data in form of binary float array, transforms the binary float array to VTK image data, a form which VTK knows how to render, ingests data of type 3D velocity model, is not ready for parallel execution, and was written in Java. I will now provide more thorough definitions for what a visualization toolkit is and introduce the concept of a visualization pipeline. VTK is a visualization toolkit. Visualization toolkits provide functions such as filtering, gridding or interpolating, mapping, which transforms data into views like isosurfaces, usually represented by geometric primitives, rendering, which projects the geometric views into pixels. These functions are referred to as operators. The number of operators supported by toolkits vary greatly. For example, generic mapping tools, GMT, a visualization toolkit, contains over 60 operators, while VTK contains hundreds of operators. VTK requires that users write what are known as pipelines. These pipelines are analogous to Unix pipes, in which the output of an operator feeds into the next operator in the pipeline sequence. The first operator in visualization pipelines are usually some sort of a data reader. The Java program previously presented that visualizes the velocity model can be seen as a pipeline of VTK operators. It is up to the user to write these pipelines, which means they must select the operators composing the pipeline and orchestrate the execution of those operators. Let us revisit the VTK Java code that generated the velocity model isosurfaces in light of the visualization pipelines concept. As was stated earlier, this Java code is implementing a visualization pipeline in which each segment of code corresponds to the instantiation and configuration of some VTK operator. Here I have highlighted the VTK pipeline, where the circles represent a particular VTK operator and the arrows denote the flow of data between the operators. Here we see that the velocity model visualization was generated by a pipeline consisting of 8 VTK operators. Each operator has a specific function. In this case, operator 1 is a data reader and is responsible for transforming the raw input data encoded as binary float array into VTK image data, a format that the view mapper can generate the isosurfaces geometry from. See operator 2. The surfaces geometry is then appended with the wireframe and finally fed into the renderer, labeled as operator 6. The rendered data is then magnified by operator 7 and finally transformed into a JPEG by operator 8. Although the first line of each code segment corresponds to the instantiation of some VTK operator, the remaining lines of code are configuring the behavior of the operator through parameter settings. Here we see that each operator has a set of parameters that fine-tune its behavior. For example, the data reader operation must know about the structure of the input data, including its size, dimensionality, byte storage order, either big or little endian, and number of scalar components associated with each grid cell, just to name a few. Additionally, operator 2, which extracts the isosurfaces geometry from the VTK image data, must know how many surfaces to draw as well as what range of values to consider. It is important to note that even if users can orchestrate their pipelines in a manner that could generate the required visualization, incorrect setting of the operator parameters can yield a null or empty visualization, or even worse, a visualization that misrepresents or hides critical aspects of the data. As I hope you are convinced by now, a user must have a variety of skills to write a visualization application that generates a quality visualization. To recap, users must know about the different representations or views for data, what toolkits support a particular view, what toolkits operate on a particular data format, how to install a visualization toolkit, what language the toolkit is built on, what operators are needed to compose a pipeline, and suitable arguments for the operators, and finally how to develop software in general.